What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Deer Vein Podcast. Today we got Jonathan Bohm from Catman Outdoors. You probably know him from Catman Outdoors. You really don't see his name a lot all over the place. Everyone just knows him as Catman.
Yep, most people call me Catman.
But you're out of Tennessee, right?
Yes, sir.
Yep. Okay, so out of Tennessee, does a lot of public land hunting, does a lot of scouting, just puts in a ton of time in the woods. And so today we're going to pick his brain on early season. And if you haven't already, go check out his YouTube channel right away because there's a lot more information there. And having that visual always really helps. You've got Instagram and Facebook, all that fun stuff as well. But personally, I enjoy watching your YouTube channel just because I'm a visual dude. So I like seeing, like when you're talking about the acorns and the size and looking
Hmm.
at different CRP fields and things like that. I just like seeing that, especially like that super funky buck that you had on video. It had like no points on it. It should have been like an 8 point and it had like nothing on it.
Yeah, it's a 5 point. Yeah,
Yeah,
I got a
yeah.
buddy. I got a buddy down there who's got him on trail camera too. Uh, that's an interesting deer.
Right? Someone's gonna shoot him this year and be like, man, this is a funky buck.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, man. So starting out, I'd just like to start out with kind of give everybody like a little slight brief history in general, where you are, what kind of terrain you're hunting, and yeah, and go from there.
So I'm from the Nashville area. Grew up here and got into hunting kind of on my own about give or take 10 years ago, and just kind of took off with it. Kind of, they say you got bit by the bug, and I got bit pretty hard, and learned a lot through um, just researching online, watching YouTube videos. I got on Tennessee Deer on tndeer.com on their forums, and people put up with all my questions and everything there for a while, and I learned a lot from them, and just kind of went out there and got after it. But the kind of terrain I usually hunt is more or less the Nashville Basin and the Highland Rim, which is like ridge and hollow type terrain, big hardwoods mixed with rolling hills, agriculture, a little bit of swamp, not very much, a little bit of flat land, but mostly rolling hills, give or take, depending on where I'm at. And I like to move around, so I'm not always just hunting in one small area. I'll get up and drive a couple hours to hunt pretty regular. So that's kind of the area that I'm in that I spend most of my time.
Okay, and then it's mainly public land, all
Yeah, I
public
would say
land, or
I would say the majority of it. I do have a couple of private properties to hunt. One of them being my backyard. I rent a place on like 60 something acres, and I'll go. That's just kind of my leisurely spot where I'm like, I'm
yeah,
gonna go shoot a doe, or I'm gonna sit out here see if a buck chases a doe, depending on the time of year. So
yeah,
I've got some options, but mostly like hunting public land just because of the huge amount of it across the state.
yeah. No, that makes sense, and that is a prime opportunity when you can lease a house that's on acreage and they give you hunting rights as well.
Yeah.
I got a buddy who did that, and it's I'm jealous for sure because you ain't got to buy it, and it's
Yeah.
just built in.
Yep. Yep. It's a sweet little setup for sure. I like it.
Yeah. All right. So the first okay, so after going over that, next thing is kind of in general just getting into scouting. So for people who are scouting over the summer, I personally prefer to do a lot of my scouting in like February, March, and April, and then kind of like what I want to say, like top it off or just double check everything in August and September.
Yeah.
Like that's what I like to do. But if for people who are just getting out there and scouting this summer and getting after it, um, where do you begin and where do you start and what do you look for and how are you going to find deer this fall?
Well, there I'll do one of two things. I'll do two things every year. I'll go to some of my regular spots that I know and just poke around, maybe watch some bean fields or get up in the woods and see what kind of stuff I can find. And then I'll also spend time looking on the map, usually on OnX, and looking at new areas that I want to check out for the upcoming season, because I always like to mix it up a little bit. And then I'll drop pins of areas that look interesting to me, usually looking for, if it's a new area, looking for something diverse that's got a mix of habitat. Not to say that big woods is bad, but I like finding an edge of something at least to work with as a starting point. And if it is big woods, I'm looking more for terrain-based stuff when I'm map scouting. But I'll drop some pins. I usually type in the description point of interest and drop a pin so that I can go back and look, because otherwise I would forget that I ever saw that spot on the map.
Sure.
And then when I get time, usually during the weekend, or if I get a day during the week, I'll go out and just start walking around and looking for deer sign, looking for potential food sources, oak trees, browse. I like to pay a lot of attention to the low green browse on the bottom, like near the ground, because if there's a lot of deer in the area, usually be browsed on a little heavier down low. And of course, different types of oak trees. And I'll just go from there and see what I find.
Yeah. Okay. I got a few questions out of that from you. So on the front end, before you even really step foot on a property, you're pulling it up on a satellite map or a topographical map or a hybrid or something like OnX, right? So you're poking around on satellite maps, and you said you're looking for edges. Like, what are you talking about exactly when you're looking for an edge? Like, is it just woods meets field or what?
Yeah, anything like that. Woods meets thicker woods, woods meets a field, CRP meets a field, CRP meets hardwoods, pines meet hardwoods. Creeks are edges too. Deer will travel alongside creeks, and then they will cross on certain areas, where it's easier to cross.
Sure.
Just any kind of edge of anything, really, and anything habitat related.
And why is that? Why are you looking along those edges?
I guess because deer are creatures of the edges. They like to run along the edge of different types of habitat, and they also, a lot of times, there's some type of food source along that edge, because it allows for different types of vegetation to grow. And whether it be an ag field like a fresh cut cornfield, or if you're on the edge of a pine thicket and there's some big oaks along an old fence row or something like that. Like old fence rows in the middle of the woods, they're pretty subtle on a satellite map, but if you got a bunch of young hardwoods that doesn't have much oaks or acorns, and then you got an old fence row with one big row of mature oaks, that's always something to look for. Just anything really, any kind of
Yeah.
edge the deer tend to gravitate towards.
No, that's a great point. And I personally, like, I really enjoy creeks. Um
Mm-hmm.
for two reasons. One is it kind of really narrows the point of crossing for deer, right? There's only limited crossing spots. You can actually really hone in on where they're kind of funneling down towards to cross,
Yeah,
right?
that does depend on the creek. Some creeks have got
Yes.
that perfect crossing, and some of them are just kind of, they cross anywhere. But
Right,
yeah,
yeah. I don't
I
like
love
the
hunting
creeks that are like
creeks.
an inch deep, but if they're like,
Yeah,
a couple feet, that's like perfect. The other reason I really like
yeah,
them is that it stops a lot of hunters from crossing them too.
yeah,
Especially if they're like 3 feet deep or so. Like, that's kind of because I like to wear hip boots. And when I go out there, like if I know I'm going for like a creek crossing, I can wear a hip boot and I get to get into water like, 3 feet deep or so. And it's not like I'm wearing waders, so I can still walk a decent distance. But that stops so many hunters from crossing. And if you can cross that and then get into a nice little spot on the other side, that's been very helpful for me and successful and
yeah.
just getting to see a lot more deer on public.
I would say it's not always that way, at least around where I hunt, because we got a lot of broken up properties, and
Okay.
chances are someone can come in from the other side of the creek as well.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it all depends. I mean, you can use that to get away from people. It just depends on the property you're hunting. And
Sure.
I do like using a canoe or a kayak or something to get up a creek if it's possible, without too much work. If I can just slide up in there quiet and tie off on the bank and just creep up there, if I'm going to hunt close to the creek, it's a good quiet way to get in there.
Yeah. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, the other thing you brought up right away was when you're looking at like a map, you said you like to, if it's a big woods, you're looking more for topography changes. So
Yeah.
are you just looking for like, big hills, big valleys? What are you looking for in that sense?
Typically, I'm looking at the secondary points off the main ridge, or if there is a good saddle. Some of our terrain around here is ridge and hollow, where you got big, long ridges with a lot of secondary points coming off of them, and not many saddles. So the deer utilize those points quite a bit. But if you do find a saddle between two high ridges where it dips down, and that's the one place the deer can cross, that can be a money spot just any time of year to catch deer movement. Um, if you can tell on the map, which you usually can, if there is a clear cut or maybe a stand of pine trees in the big woods, always check out the edge of that because the deer may be bedding in the pines, or if it's a clear cut, they're most likely bedding in there for the cover. And then again, there could be some kind of food source along the edge that. Yeah. So I will look for edges in that type of big woods, but if it's true big woods where everything's the same, you're looking mostly for terrain-based setups.
Gotcha. And then as far as like those secondary points, is that generally like bedding locations, or is that kind of where they'll feed on acorns, or what is it about those that are
It
popular?
could it could be both. I've had them bed. Sometimes they'll bed out on the point, looking down into the hollow, so they can see you coming or see anything coming. Sometimes, if you're walking down a ridge and you got points going off either side, sometimes they'll bed down just in the divot between points, right where the hollow starts. I've had them bed there too, just where they're using the terrain to hide because they're in
Sure.
open woods. And actually, the first buck I killed last season was real early, and it was some pretty mild terrain, but there was still little drainages in the woods, and I was on an oak flat between those drainages and some ag. And the ag was a good ways off on another property, but it may have played a part in why I killed that deer. But I think, and I never went up to actually jump the deer, but I think they were bedded just in that little divot in the terrain, just out of sight, because that's where all the deer came from. And I never walked far enough to bump anything. I just got up on that oak flat, got as close as I was comfortable to that drainage, just to where I couldn't see down in it, and then climbed a tree. And then the deer around sunset or whatever would just kind of appear from that direction.
That's pretty cool. Did you have had you previously scouted that, or was that just all like, I think this could be right?
I had scouted it once or twice, and
Okay.
you know, I guess the first actual sit where I was hunting is when I saw what the deer were doing, and that's when I realized I need to be extra careful around those drainages because I think that's where they were coming from.
Gotcha. No, that's a new one. I don't hunt, man. It's been a long time since I hunted like a big mature woods.
Yeah,
So most of the woods I hunt, it's tough to see 20 yards,
yeah,
30
and I've
yards.
hunted a lot of that stuff too. Honestly, I'm still not very experienced with big woods hunting. I learn a little bit every year, so
Yeah.
I'm definitely not an expert in that area. I learned to deer hunt around thickets, cedar thickets, young hardwoods, CRP type stuff, and I learned to sit on the ground with a rifle or get up a tree where it was just open enough to shoot with a bow. And I killed a lot of does and stuff that way, hunting thick stuff. I still like hunting thick stuff just because we got so much of it around here.
Yeah. Yeah, the nice thing about it is when you see a deer, they're in range, right?
Oh yeah, I like to set up right on top of them. I like having them in my lap.
Yeah. No. I've actually heard people talk about those little ditches and divots in like rolling hill type stuff too, where there really isn't a whole lot of timber or anything. You just got those little drainages and those little ditches that those deer can drop down into, and they're not up on the top in the wind, and they're in the shade, they're out of the wind, and they're out of, like what is it, skylining themselves or anything like that, and they just
Yeah,
dip down in there. But I guess that makes a lot of sense that they do that in big woods as well. If there's not a whole lot on the understory and they want to hide, that's a great spot to do it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times they also will bed on the side of a hill, like whether it's on a point or just the side of a ridge overlooking a bottom. So, say you're coming in from a bottom and you got big woods ahead of you. There may be some deer up there, uh, just sitting up on the hillside, and they could see you coming from a mile away, and they're gone before you get there. I think they do that. I don't have too much experience hunting that type of stuff, at least not being able to tell exactly where the deer were bedded, because the biggest challenge around here is they don't bed the same place all the time. They can really just sit down just
Right.
about anywhere between all the thick cover and the rolling terrain. They can just plop down wherever they want. So the trends I have seen, at least with the ridge and hollow type terrain, is they seem to bed either on the points or just off in the drainage off the side of the ridge.
Gotcha. I want to talk about bedding, but I don't want to talk about it yet. so,
Yeah.
so we'll like that would have been a great transition, but I want to talk about that a little bit later on.
Okay.
So, um, after you've sat down and you've taken a look at the satellite map, you've dropped all your pins and everything. Um, you said previously that you like to go and poke around the areas that you've hunted before, right? And kind of check things out. What are,
Hmm.
you know, if you know an area pretty well, you have a pretty good idea as to where you're going to sit or where the good spots are in that area. What are you going to double check? What are you going to go look at?
Depending on the time of year, if it's like right now, I'll be looking up, use binoculars or whatever and look for trees that actually have acorns on them. If there's ag fields or some kind of open area to watch in the evening, I'll try to get eyes on some bucks or get eyes on some deer and see that they're in there, see what kind of deer I got to work with. And I may go in and hang a trail camera occasionally as well.
Okay.
But
Just to double check and see what's going on.
yeah,
Are
just
there
kind of get
any
an idea.
food sources outside of egg fields and acorns that you're really looking for?
Uh, I mean, deer browse just about everywhere they go, so there may be certain. I would say if you've got fields, but they're not row crops. I mean, a good hay field can have a lot of clover in it and stuff that I would consider like a destination food source. And then there's food that they will eat on their way from bedding to a destination food source. So let's say let's say the destination where they're heading in the evening is a cut cornfield or a big white oak tree that's dropping like crazy. But maybe they're getting there a little bit late and you want to get back closer to bedding. Let's say you find a persimmon tree along a pretty good trail between bedding and that destination food source. We Persimmon trees can be hit or miss, but that's the kind of place where they usually will hit it. And then you're looking for, if it's during season, you're looking for fresh deer sign that they're eating the persimmons. If
Sure.
it's before season, you're just looking to see if there's fruit on the tree because they don't all have fruit. So when I'm scouting, if I see a persimmon tree, I'm looking for green persimmons. And if I think it's in a good location, I'll drop a pin there and come back during season and see if they're actually hitting it or not.
Gotcha. And the reason you're kind of moving back off that destination is because they're getting to that destination food source, that alfalfa field or soybean field in the dark. So you're trying to catch
Yeah,
them in the daylight, right? So that little persimmon
yeah,
tree will be a daylight active food source,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay. Gotcha. I just wanted to clarify that in case. Okay. So that's kind of what you're looking for in your existing spots, in your new spots. So, you drop all your pins on your edges. You drop your pins and if you're doing topography, and then you're just going out there getting boots on the ground and taking a couple hours and just walking everywhere.
Yeah, and if I can, I'll take a whole day and just walk and see what I find. Look for deer sign and potential food sources that stick out, and of course, habitat changes and terrain features that I might not have been able to see on the map.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Um, do you worry about like bumping deer or scaring deer off or anything like that when you're doing this type of scouting right now?
Scouting, no, it's good if I'm bumping deer. That tells me they're in there.
Okay.
It's not going to affect what they do a month or two down the road, So, and I'm not going to be in there every day pressuring them. So if I'm going to walk, taking a day and walking the whole area and dropping pins, if I bump deer, that's a good sign that they're comfortable in there.
Okay. No, I asked that because I have the same thought. Like I like to when I bump deer, that means I know they're there. Exactly like what you're saying, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah,
But some people are like, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go in there and all that stuff. But then my thing to them is how are you gonna learn? How are you gonna figure it out?
yeah. You've got to know where the deer want to be, and a lot, and part of that is bumping them because you're getting up in their bedroom and getting up where they live, and you're going to bump them sometimes, and that's just part of it. But they're deer; they're used to being spooked by things, and they'll come back, even if it takes them a day if you spook them bad enough. But a lot of times, if you're in the middle of the day and they're bedded down, they'll get up and run off, and they don't stop to look back sometimes, and they don't even spook that bad. They just run off because they heard something coming. They'll be back.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And another good point is, that you made is that satellite maps and topographical maps can only tell you so much. Like when you're out there on the ground, you can find things that you can't find from your phone, right?
Hmm.
You can see more, you understand the deer trails and exactly how they use them. Um, well, not necessarily exactly, but you can see their tracks, you can actually see the trails and all that. And I think that gives you a real advantage compared to other hunters who are just coming in from a satellite map perspective, right? They
Yeah,
don't have their boots on the grounds, and you might understand like where that old fence row is that holds all the big oaks and all the mature oaks that are actually dropping. And you
yeah,
can't tell that from a satellite map, you
yeah.
know?
A lot of times you can tell more mature trees on the satellite, but you can't tell what's dropping, and if there's good deer sign around it. You've got to go out there and actually find where the deer are and where the food actually is. You can look on the map and see potential food like a crop field you can see on the map, or you can see some big hardwoods and assume there's oaks in there, but you still got to go out and find exactly where they are and if the deer are in there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So when you're out there wandering around and checking things out, what makes you decide to go, I should drop a trail camera here? What makes you do that versus just say, oh, this is a good spot. I'm not worried about dropping a camera.
Um, to be honest, if I've got a camera in my pocket, I'll hang it. I don't run a whole lot of cameras, but
Okay.
sometimes I'll be in an area where I would like to hang one, but I don't know where, and I'll throw it in my pocket if I got one with me. And I say I don't know exactly where I want to hang it, but I want to put a camera in this area because I think there might be a good buck in the area. I'll just look for a good trail crossing or something that a lot of deer will pass through, and then put a
Okay.
camera on that.
Sure. No, that's something that I always like contemplate because I got one camera and I've walking around and I'm like, ooh, this spot looks good. I want to drop this camera here. And then I go, but there might be another good spot in 20 minutes. Do I drop it here or do I keep going? um,
Well, that's a good point. If you're going in one way and coming out the same way, then just remember, if I don't find a good spot 20 minutes later, I'll just hang it here on the way out. If you're running a loop, then you just got to make up your mind and hang the camera. And if it
right.
looks like a bang up deer trail, say two really good trails cross, maybe it's a saddle in big woods, or maybe it's an edge in farm country, whatever it may be. If you find a spot and you're like, yeah, there's deer coming through here a lot, then just put the camera up and see what you get.
Yeah, no, and that's really what it comes down to is just making a decision and doing it, and
Yeah,
then coming back in 2, 3, 4 weeks and just checking it and seeing how it went, right?
yeah.
Um, so when you're walking around, what makes you think there might be a good buck in the area? Are you like seeing scrapes and rubs from past years, or are you just thinking, we're pretty far back, it's pretty deep, and there's probably something bopping around in here?
Um, old sign is good, but you never know what got killed out the last year during gun season.
Mm-hmm.
So old sign could mean there's an even bigger buck this year, or it could just mean there was a good one last year and it got shot. So if there's a lot of old sign, it's probably a good area that future big bucks will hang out in. So maybe last year's 2 or 3 year old is finally getting pretty good size, and we'll use the same area. Um, I think that's where watching, if you've got ag to hunt, or if you're hunting around agriculture, if you got bean fields, or even hay fields, but soybeans are like drugs to the deer. If you've got some soybeans to watch, that's a great way to get a visual idea of what's out there, and
Sure.
watch it, from 30 minutes before sunset till dark, and you'll see a whole lot of the deer in the area, especially halfway through the summer when the beans are getting up there and all the deer are aware of them. If you don't have soybeans, I mean, trail cameras help, or if you got some other vantage point to watch deer in the evening, that helps. If you found a shed, if you went shed hunting back in February, March, and you found some nice sheds, then there's a good chance there's a good one in there this year because he made it through season. So little
Yeah.
things like that. If you're not actually seeing a big one or getting pictures of them, then I mean, a lot of old buck signs always a good place to start because it means there's bucks using the area pretty good during the rut.
Gotcha. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I like that. I mean, I should have thought of that, but yeah, finding sheds obviously means that they survived, right? And that they're moving
Mm-hmm.
through. Do you ever notice, like, if there is an absence of, soybeans or alfalfa or hay fields or whatever, do you ever just watch CRP fields and end up seeing good deer in them or no?
My backyard, one of the fields behind my place, is kind of like that. It hasn't been cut in over a year, and I have gone out a couple times this year and seen a bachelor group of younger bucks. The big one, I've got a big one on camera, but he hasn't been out with the rest of them.
Hmm.
So yeah, it can be if you've got a good vantage point where you can look down. The thing with CRP fields in the summer is you got some real tall weeds, and it's going to be hard to see, at least around here.
Yeah.
Stuff gets real tall and real thick when they don't cut fields. So I like hunting over CRP later in the season with a rifle when the weeds have died out and it's more just like broom sedge or just tall grasses, and you can see the deer a little better because it's thinned out. But this time of year, I mean, unless you got a good vantage point, it's going to be hard to see anything in a CRP field.
Sure. Do you ever use like ag fields that are off the public, that are
Oh
on
yeah, for
private
sure.
land, but you use them as like the destination food source?
Yeah, deer don't know property lines, and I like to hunt around property lines because going back to that edge thing, there's usually almost always an edge of some sort on a property line, especially in farm country. It may be that old fence row, it may be woods to ag or whatever it is. I'm often hunting pretty close to a property line, and yeah, and those private ag fields can be a big factor in deciding where to set up.
Yeah, no, I bring that point up because as we're talking about ag fields, when I first really started getting into public land hunting, about I've been hunting for I don't know 17 years now, 18 years, but I really dived into public land about same time as you, about 10 years ago, 8 years ago when I got done with college. I had private land that I could hunt when I was out in college. And then when I came back, the private land was almost 2 hours away. So started doing a lot more public
Yeah,
land. And for the first year or two, I was only looking for the ag on the public. Like I was
really.
looking for those soybean fields and stuff on the public. And then I was like, why am I doing that? Because all this ag over on the private clearly holds deer. I know they're going that way. Why don't I just try to intercept them before they get there? Right.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's a lot of what I do when I'm hunting around farm country. A lot of times I'm hunting those types of setups. Um, I will say if you've got thicker woods on public and then it butts up to private, that's an ag field. A lot of times those deer in the early season when the beans are still green or the corn is fresh cut before acorns are coming down hard, a lot of times those deer will bed right on the edge of the field. So if the field is the property line, then it can be pretty tough to even set up on that type of deal. But if they've got to come through say a little patch of open woods with a little bit of browse, and then there's some really good bedding cover, a couple 100 yards back on public. If you can get in that little staging area, then that's when it can be a really good setup.
Yeah. No, I hear you there. I have a spot that I really like for a multitude of reasons. Um and I've always had cameras on it and I've always liked it, but I never hunted it until this last year. And I had a few doe encounters, but I know there's good bucks in there, but I think I was in there too late. I think someone else had come in and put the pressure on before me. I didn't see any like gut piles or anything. So I don't think they killed any of the good bucks. I think they just got in there before me. So I'm going there like that's one of my opening weekend sits is kind of
Yeah,
getting into this spot. But it's you got all this ag. When you park, you literally park your vehicle between the ag and the woods, and there's a big CRP field. So you walk away from the ag down the edge of the CRP, and then it's a pretty open woods that goes for, I don't know, 80, 90, 100 yards or so. And then it becomes this thick wall of just thorns and briars and all sorts of, just stuff. But
like
that's
a clear
also
cut.
that's the public private barrier.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so pretty much they come out of that private, and that's only before it hits, then that private is only maybe 20 acres, and then it hits another CRP field on public on the other side. And
I
so
got
all these deer trails are just funneling right into that chunk. And so I just gotta sit that open woods right on the edge of that thick stuff, right in between the public and the private ag on the other side. And I get, right now, if I go out there, I dropped a camera there the other week. If I go out there and check it, I know it's gonna have pictures of decent bucks on it.
you. Yeah,
And I'm not one to always judge the size of a deer by the thickness of a tree that it rubs, but some of these trees, like, they are tore up and they're tall, which is what makes me really interested in it, is that, they're not just like
yeah.
thigh height, they're almost like belly button to chest height, and
Hmm.
it's like 4 or 5 feet up and you're like, all right.
Yeah, that's an older deer for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost killed a good buck a couple years ago. It was a similar property line. There was no ag involved, but there was some CRP down through the woods. But I came in off the road into this strip of hardwoods, nice hardwoods, but it's not very wide, just a narrow strip of woods. And then right on the property line is where it got thick, and it was early during gun season in the morning. I had a couple of does work right down the property line, kind of quartering away from me. And then I had a nice, like 9 or 10 point buck come straight off private towards me. And I was getting my gun ready, and he looked and saw those two does going down the fence line, and he turned and chased them back on the private, and I never saw him again.
Ah.
But yeah, it was one of those things, kind of like, as long as nobody's walking all over that thicket, pushing deer around, it'll usually be somewhat of a sanctuary because it's so thick. People don't want to go in there.
Yeah, no, and I don't think anybody hunts it. I didn't see a lot of times you'll see tree stands right on the edge, right? You'll see
Yeah,
private tree stands right there, pretty much saying stay out of here. Um, but I did notice the neighbor. So there's at one point it kind of comes to four corners of public, private, private, private. And one of the neighbors has his ladder stand right on that corner as well. So I'm thinking that he knows what's up as well, and he's just hoping that they, come through his property before they come through the public.
yeah.
Um, but no. So back to just the general process of how you figure out where to go. I know you're like, you've hinted at it, but haven't really said it. You hunt a multitude of properties, right?
Yeah.
A ton of different ones. So why do you not just figure out one and hunt it? Why do you hunt so many?
Really just for a change of scenery and to learn as much as I can. because there's always something that I'm learning every year. There are certain areas that are closer to home that I hunt more often just for the convenience and because I want to learn them better. But then, I mean, the season goes on, more people come in and hunt, and deer start getting pushed off the property onto other properties, and I'm kind of like, yeah, let me switch it up here and go try this new spot. I've done for some reason, I don't know why, I've done pretty good in the past coming into a new spot that I've never hunted before, scouting it out and hunting. I've seemed to do pretty well for whatever reason, I don't know, but something about that new dirt, kind of gets me freshened up, and I seem to get into deer more often than not when I do that.
For sure. When you mean scouting and hunting, is that like, are you scouting and hunting and they like in at the exact same time, or are you scouting like a month in advance and then hunting it,
Um,
or both?
both, both.
Yeah, both.
Often the same time. I'll be like, hey, I'm gonna go check out this spot, and or maybe I'll do deer camp for a few days, and I'll scout the day before, and then hunt for a few days, but scout between hunts. And I guess something about having that fresh new ground that I've never hunted before. If you hunt the same spots over and over again, you get used to seeing deer in certain places, and you kind of get more narrow-minded and not willing to try new things on the place that you've been hunting for years. So I think
Yeah.
getting out there and getting in some unfamiliar territory really helps you to stay open-minded and figure out what the deer are doing.
Oh no, that I 100% agree with that in the sense of it's always fun to put your skills to the test on a different property and see if the same thing that works here works over here, or maybe it's different. And like you said, you might learn something new. One of the reasons that I really started getting after multiple pieces was because I was actually getting pushed out by pressure. Like I had a
Yeah.
bunch of spots that I thought were great, and then all of a sudden like Halloween hits and I
Oh
was
yeah.
the only person out there, and now there's 6 other guys out there and we're kind of contending for the same spot, and it's like I
Yeah.
don't want to, that's not why I'm out there hunting. I don't want to, have an MMA
Yeah.
fight in the woods.
I tend to hunt the places I'm most familiar with. I know where most of the pressure usually is during the muzzle loader and rifle season. Um, I would say I hunt those more during bow season, and then during gun season, I hunt more on the fringes, the overlook spots. It may be, a good ways back in there, or it may be a spot that you drive by on the road that doesn't even have a parking area. Just somewhere that gets overlooked that's got that good mix of habitat, good cover for bedding, good food sources, and obviously you got to go and make sure the deer are actually using that area. But finding those overlooked spots during gun season has helped me a lot.
Gotcha. So those, I mean, that's a whole nother ball game of those overlook spots.
Yeah.
So then okay, after we've kind of covered, what am I trying to say here? The multitude of properties that you've hunted or that you're looking at, how do you even come to figure out which ones or which spots you want to hunt during the early season? Because when does Tennessee open? When does your opener happen?
Fourth Saturday in September every year is the
Okay.
statewide opener. We got a handful of wildlife management areas that might open a week early. And then we've got the private land velvet hunt coming up here in about a week and a half, which is I think this year it's the fifth weekend in August.
Okay.
So we've got that, but for public land, most of the state opens the fourth Saturday in September.
Gotcha. So then based on that, I mean, early season for you guys, I always generally think the pre-rut pretty much kicks off around October 15th up here or so, maybe a little bit sooner, maybe a little bit later, depending on where you are. Is that pretty similar to you guys?
Yeah, you may see a little bit of rutting activity, especially from those little young bucks, mid to late October. It starts to really heat up where I'm at. Right here where I live, the peak rut is right dead middle of November.
Okay.
but then I could drive an hour one way, and it's the first or second week in November. I could drive an hour the other way, and it's in December. So it varies a good bit. Not as much as
Nice.
Alabama. Tennessee's got a lot of different rut timings, but Alabama's even worse. They got crazy. They got a map online of all the different rut
Yeah.
times.
I actually podcasted the other day with Chasing Tails out of Florida. He
Yeah.
said he interviewed a guy the other day who shot a buck tending a doe on August 4th.
Hmm.
Down in southern Florida. He's like, yeah, the rut around here is pretty ridiculous.
Sounds a
But
little too hot. I can put up with heat, but that sounds a little too hot for me.
dude, he said that he was like, yeah, man, on a early season sit, you're going out and it's 95 degrees, when you're walking out into the woods.
Oh yeah,
Um,
it was like that here last year when I started hunting. It was 97 one day.
ah, it's terrible. I'm not a fan, no
I'll tell
offense.
you what, I was sweating before I left the parking area, but I saw a lot of deer. So
Ah, nice.
if you're in the deer, it's worth it to me. But if you're not seeing anything, it sucks.
Yeah, ain't that the truth. Um, so um what was I gonna ask? So how are we that we got off on that little tangent about the rut, but like I mean when you're looking at the time of year, how are you really trying to figure out, okay, I know you said you love the early season, you love hunting the early season before we started this. It's like one of your favorites. So how are you picking out where to go in those, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the pre-rut really kicks in and you kind of shifting gears there? Like what says to you, I'm going to hunt these, 6 spots or something like that?
Um, Honestly, unless I've got a deer camp planned, you know, I just do whatever spur of the moment. I'll look at the weather. What's the wind doing? Have I been out and found any food sources? If not, should I go check this spot out? I'll pull out Onyx and look at all my pins and be like, hey, today's a good day to go to this spot. I'll just decide. And depending on how much time I have with work and other stuff, if it's closer to home, I'm more likely to go somewhere closer to home if I'm limited on time. But if I got more time, I'll go spend a day a little farther away from home. So I
Sure.
just kind of decide as I go, depending on weather and what kind of food sources I'm finding.
Gotcha. Do you have any like spots that you've like habitually sat and that you like early season, like, man, there's this one spot that I always hit regardless?
Oh, I've got a spot that I hit all season long. I've killed on opening day of bow. I've killed on New Year's Day. But I call it my doe killing spot. I don't see many bucks. I actually saw the first nice buck ever in there last year during bow season. Never saw him
Huh.
again. But it's a doe killing spot. I don't want anyone to figure out where it is and go into detail on. But it's got some thicker stuff. It's got edges, property lines, everything. It's not a big area. It's pretty well overlooked for the most part. You don't see too many
Nice.
people in there, and I'll hunt it maybe two, three, maybe 4 times throughout the season. I never overhunt it. I'll just be like, one day I've been hunting hard other places, and I'll be like, all right, the wind is good. I'm going to my doe killing spot. And I usually see deer. Sometimes I'll come up empty, but it's one of those
Yeah.
habitual spots I go back to every year.
Okay. There is I have a similar spot like that I've found. Um it's a little tiny strip of woods, maybe 40 yards wide, and it's between two ag fields on the west side and the east side. On the north side, it's a swamp, and the south side is like a hill that comes up to some houses. So we're
Oh,
kind of on the edge of all these different little pieces. And to the far east, there's like there's a road and then there's a swamp. So the deer will, and then there's a big, like a real big ag field on the other side of that swamp. And the swamp it has no high ground in it, but there's just, when you drive by it in the winter, there's 2 or 3 giant deer trails coming out of that swamp, crossing the road, and it's from public to public. but then they go down this tree line and then they'll bed up on that hill actually right below the houses. Like I've
Yeah, I
watched
do
them
like
go.
hunting around. I like hunting around developed areas too. If depending on the place I'm hunting, uh, a lot of times if we got a 100-yard law for public land, you got to be at least 100 yards from a visible house, unless you have the owner's permission. So usually
Okay.
I don't have the permission. So as long as I'm at least 100 yards from a house, I do like hunting some of those thickets or overlooked spots that are near homes that you wouldn't expect people to be hunting, because there's kids yelling, dogs barking. People don't like to hunt those kind of areas, but the deer are used to that kind of thing.
Right.
I've had I've killed some deer pretty close to houses a bunch of times.
Yeah, no, and this spot I like to the really nice thing that I like about it is if I ever like get up late or get out the door late in the morning, it's only a morning spot. It's a terror. I've sat it in the evening and I don't see anything. But
Hmm.
if I'm running late, I get there and it's maybe like on the long side, a 5 minute walk from the truck.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I just drop, I park, I drop down the hill and I set up like I'm probably just outside of 100 yards from those houses.
Those are the
And
best. Those are the best spots. The easy
yeah,
walk.
and
I can.
they come along the tree line and they work their way right across in front of me at about 20 yards and up the hill below those houses. And if I have I forget what wind it is, but if I have the right wind, I get in there and get out of there and they have no idea and they walk right by me. I haven't seen a good buck ever use it, but I
Yeah,
have seen plenty of does and small bucks come through that piece. And
that's how
I've
my
never
doe
told
killing
anybody
spot
about
is.
it.
That's a lot like my doe killing spot. It's got a lot of the same features, and you know, I can walk 5 minutes from the truck, and depending on depending on the wind, I'll hunt different sides of it depending on the wind. But sometimes I might even be 50 yards from my truck. Sometimes I'll park a little farther away to get, just depending on what part of it I'm hunting. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's a lot like that. I see mostly does and young bucks, like last year's spawns that didn't get kicked out. And occasionally maybe a nice buck would come through there, like last year it did. But yeah, it's just one of those spots where it's real deery. You just go in there and there's
Yeah.
always deer in there. And there's some big red oaks in there too. I need to check those this year to see if they're dropping, because that's a big factor in how I hunt that spot. There's like two or three big red oaks right where I climb. There's not many places to climb. It's too thick. The one good spot. If those red oaks are dropping, it's money for early season.
Gotcha. Um, are pretty much acorns your favorite food source early? Like if you can target that, that's what you're going after.
Yeah, I would say probably red
Okay.
oaks, because they start dropping first. Uh, Going into mid October, later October, the white oaks start dropping, and if you find a hot white oak, it's better than any red oak. But during the early season, most of the time you're only going to find ripe red oak acorns dropping off of a few trees, and finding when you find the one the deer are eating, then that's a killing spot usually.
Gotcha. And for anybody listening, how I if you don't know the difference between a red oak and a white oak, they obviously look pretty similar. But red oaks have pointy leaves and white oaks have rounded leaves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
generally speaking, yeah. I'll
Yeah.
actually be doing a video later in October towards November. I would be doing it sooner, but I got to get pictures of all the acorns. But I'll be doing an oak identification series,
Oh,
going
nice.
through some of my favorite ones and a bunch of other ones you may encounter across the eastern U.S. Forget how many species I've got, but it's over a dozen, and I'll just kind of briefly go through each one and how to tell them apart, which one I think are the deer's favorite, which ones drop early. So I pay close attention to that, because certain trees I won't even look at, won't even give a second glance. But then certain trees I'll be like, yeah, I need to go back and check that, because it's got acorns and that might be a hot tree.
Got it. Yeah. No, I look forward to watching that. That'll be cool. That's one thing that I got to get a lot better at personally is just like my overall like woodsmanship and identification of plant species and stuff like that. Cause it can really help you um
Yeah,
understand why deer are doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and there's a million different kind of plants out there, and I don't know half of them, but knowing a few of the important ones definitely helps.
Yeah. Um, so what happens if like you're in an area and there's like acorns kind of like or there's oak trees like everywhere and there's a ton of acorns. Like what are you doing then?
Deer sign. If
Okay.
you go in, you may have to burn half a day to find a spot. If you scouted it before season and thought this is a good spot, but then you come in and there's acorns everywhere and the sign's not where you thought it would be, then you may just have to cover some ground and find where the deer are at. Because a lot of times there will be one or two trees that maybe the acorns taste sweeter or something, but they'll often favor, one tree over the rest, on years when there's a whole bunch of them dropping.
Gotcha. And then you're just looking for tracks and
Yeah,
you know,
fresh
less
tracks,
acorns.
fresh droppings. If I get underneath an oak tree and there's acorns on the ground and there's caps that have been cracked from the deer biting into them, and there's fresh droppings, and I start looking for a tree to climb then, because that's where they have been feeding. They were probably there earlier that day, and they'll probably be back.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, all right. So then I know earlier I said I didn't want to get into bedding. So now I'm kind of thinking about if I'm going to that acorn or that oak tree and I'm finding the acorns, I'm finding the droppings. How are you kind of figuring out where the deer are bedding? Like what leads you to go, okay, they're bedding generally over here in this area or something of that nature?
Usually, a lot of the places around here, there's a thicket somewhere close by. There's thickets everywhere. I treat any kind of thicket as potential bedding,
Okay.
especially if you got trails coming in and out. That buck I talked about earlier that I killed last year on the Oak Flat, I believe he was staging between bedding and destination food, which was a private ag field. But up on that Oak Flat, I'm pretty sure they were bedded just off in that drainage. It was open hardwoods. They didn't have much thicket, so they were coming out of open woods. But I think they were using the terrain in that instance to bed. So pretty much anywhere you can't see into or get to without spooking deer is probably where they're going to bed. And it depends on the spot you're hunting. If you're surrounded by thicket, they could, or surrounded by open woods, they could come from anywhere. But if
Sure.
you've got a very, very defined hollowed, like say a thicker drainage, or if you're on flat ground, just a big cut over, and it's just in one area, they're probably going to come out of that one area.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. And then if there's thickets all over the place, then you're kind of into that just bump them and figure it out type of phase,
Take a
right?
gamble. Yeah, take a gamble on the wind and hope they don't come from your downwind.
Right? That makes sense. Um, so then another thing that I wanted to talk about was kind of like, you do a lot of public land hunting where you're walking in, you're going in and everything. What is like a setup for you? Are you bringing in like a lone wolf and climbing sticks? Are you running a saddle or what are you doing there?
Um, Usually a saddle.
Okay,
I actually got in. I switched from a climber to a portable lock on a couple years ago. Hunted out of the lock on maybe 3 or 4 times tops, and then I borrowed a sit drag saddle from a buddy and had to get a rock climbing harness. It's like the poor boys version just to get started. And since I started using that, I haven't touched the lock on. And then I got a tethered mantis last year, and now I've got the tethered phantom with the
nice.
predator platform, and it does exactly what I need. It's super light. I fit everything in a backpack, even my camera gear, just a cheap backpack from Academy.
Yeah.
And it does everything I need. I can get up most trees. It'll get up just about any tree a lock on will. And then, depending on the situation, I might come in and sit on the ground too.
Okay. Gotcha. Are you using like climbing sticks then too?
Yeah, I use climbing sticks.
Okay. What ones do you have a preferred one that you like, or is it whatever flavor of the
Honestly,
day?
I haven't tried but one or two of them. I got a deal on some used Lone Wolf sticks, and they're a little bit on the long side, but the way I strap them to my backpack, it works out okay.
Sure.
Hawk heliums are real popular. because they're a good price point and they're lightweight, really portable.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of options. There's the real high end sticks, the Beast sticks, the Timber Ninjas that
Yeah.
are super lightweight.
The Shikars.
Yeah, the Shikars. I really haven't tried that many of them, so I don't have too much of an
Sure.
opinion on which is the best.
No, yeah. No, I'm kind of in the same boat there. I was just curious. I have the Muddy Pro sticks. So those
Oh yeah,
are
I forgot with the cam cleats.
yeah, with the yeah, so
Those,
I bought those before like the mini Hawks came out or whatever.
yeah,
And I actually bought them with a Lone Wolf. I bought the Muddy Pro sticks with a Lone Wolf hang on for like I don't know. I think it was $300 for the pair, which was a kind of expensive. But then
that's not too bad.
I sold the Lone Wolf to a friend for 180, and so then I got my sticks for 120, which I thought was pretty fair. Because
Yeah,
those Muddy Pro sticks are like 160 or 170 brand new. So
yeah, they're high, but I think they're popular for those cam cleats. You just take the rope and slip it in there, and it locks down.
dude, yeah, I mean it is very nice. And then the other big thing is like the Lone Wolves only have a one step per side,
Yeah,
whereas the
I'll be
Muddies have
honest.
dual
That's
steps.
probably what will make me switch sticks. Ultimately, is the option of double steps, and they have modifications. People machine double steps for the Lone Wolves, but I'll end up just getting new sticks in the next year or two. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, they works for me. Like I've got two, no, maybe three. I've got three. This will be my third season, I think, with the Lone Wolf sticks,
Okay.
and they get the job done. But
Yeah.
yeah, having the double step would be a good option. And I did switch out the Lone Wolf cam buckle straps. I switched them out for the tethered Versa straps, which
Oh,
like
sure.
8 foot strap weighs like less than an ounce or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And so those have been pretty sweet for like just for a little modification there, and you can do that to any stick that has a button.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Um, yeah, those are pretty slick. I don't I actually so I run an arrow hunter saddle. Um, and for me, I had the Manus. And then I tried one of the arrow hunter saddles and it just fit me a little bit better.
Oh
And
yeah,
for
sure.
anybody listening about like the saddle kind of thing, if you're really interested in that, I think saddles are kind of like boots. Like just because the boots fit me well doesn't mean it's going to fit you well. So
That's for sure.
I really, really wish like retail stores would start carrying them, but I know then the price would skyrocket, because retail needs their 100% markup. So,
Yeah,
um, like, I think you just got to try a few. And if you can ever get to the trade shows, not that they had them this year because of COVID, but maybe next year they're going to have some or something like that. If you can get there and start trying some on and just figure out which ones fit you best.
that's for sure. I've heard a lot of people prefer the Kestrel Flex.
Yeah.
That's the popular one now.
Yep.
I've
It's
heard a
their,
lot of
yeah,
people
they
speak.
actually, it's their only one right now. They
Okay,
discontinued their sales were so much higher on that
yeah,
Kestrel Flex. They discontinued everything else. Yeah.
yeah. So, like you said, it's like boots. You got to try them. If you try one and you don't like it, try another one because everyone's a little different.
Yeah.
Um, I've heard a lot of people switch from the Manus to the Kestrel just for comfort issues, and I've had a lot of people who like the Manus better, but you got to go try them out because
Right.
they're both really well made by saddle hunting gurus, and it's just a matter of preference, really.
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it's funny because like people, you would read the forums on the internet, and people would think that you and I can't be friends.
There's been some drama in the industry, that's for sure. But
Right.
I'm just in it to kill deer and use what works. So
Me
get out
too.
there. If you're interested in saddle hunting, get out there and try a few of them. You can even if you want to just bite the bullet and buy one and you don't like it, the resale value on most of the higher end saddles is pretty good right now. So
Honestly, dude,
you
I
probably can
thought
get your
about
money back.
I thought about buying a bunch of them and holding on to them until like
until they sold out.
October 10th, and then be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I got one, but it's an extra $20," and people would buy them.
That's the thing. If you want to try one, but you don't want to spend the money and lose money on it, the way the market is right now, you probably won't lose money on it, especially
Right?
going into deer season. So you try one. If you like it, stick with it. If not, put it up for sale on Facebook Marketplace or in the saddle hunter groups.
Yeah,
It'll sell pretty quick,
it'll
especially during
go
deer season. Yeah, and
for
then you
sure.
try the next one.
Yeah. Um, the other thing is I haven't done it. I haven't bit the bullet yet. I've used a platform once, um, just for like a half hour, 45 minutes when I was out messing around with a buddy. But since then I haven't used one. And I just stand on the top of my stick, the top of my fourth stick.
Yeah. You not put
Um,
any steps on the side or anything?
no, I don't do anything else. I just put my four sticks up and stand on the top one. I have a hard sole boot. I don't wear like a muck boot or anything like that. Um, so I have a hard sole boot, and I think that helps me a lot with the comfort of that. I
Yeah.
still get, I wouldn't say I get 360 degrees of shooting. I probably get 300, but I just try
Yeah.
to set up better,
Yeah.
which I think
Having
ultimately
those
helps
having
a
those side
boomer.
steps, having those side steps really helps with getting your 360.
Okay.
When I started with the sit drag and the rock climbing harness, I used three wild edge steps as a ring of steps.
Sure.
One in the front and two on the sides, and it worked fine.
Okay.
The only reason I don't use them anymore is because I got a platform now and it's so much easier.
Yeah.
But those wild edge steps, they work fine, and I would say I don't know what they're selling for now, but they're probably cheaper than most platforms, and a great way to start out and
Three
really
of them
adjust
for
them.
sure are cheaper than a platform. I
Yeah,
can tell you. I think they're
or
like 15. I think I had them for a little bit, and they're great for like packability and being small and compact.
super compact. Yeah,
But they like, yeah, I could just set up my four sticks so much faster that I was just like, I'm just gonna run this. I just ended up grabbing the sticks every time. So I was like, I'm just gonna
yeah.
sell them. So I sold them to a buddy, and he loves them. He uses them all
I
the
haven't I haven't sold mine. I keep them there just to have them, just in case I need them. One thing I
time.
did like about using those before I switched to the platform was I would use three as a ring of steps, but if I was in a pinch and I needed to get a little higher, maybe the understory was too thick and I had to get a little higher, I'd use one of them to get an extra step higher than my
Sure.
sticks would now. And I would still have two for my feet, which was enough to hunt out of, and then I could use that third one if I needed a little extra height. Or
Yeah.
you can just carry two and use your top stick
As
and
the
put two
middle.
on each side, and that would work
Yeah.
perfectly well.
No, that is a good idea. I might have to try that. I sold them all, but I might grab another one just in case.
Yeah, that's why I haven't sold them because you never know when they might come in handy. I think having a platform now, I don't think I'll ever use them as a platform again. But having them in the bag, if I think I might have to climb a little higher than usual,
Yeah,
it's good. It'd be good just throw them in the bag. They don't take up much space, and you'll be able to get a couple steps higher up the tree if you need to, depending on your setup.
sure. Makes sense. Um, all right. Well, I mean, we kind of covered like the whole gamut from scouting to picking a food source, to bedding to setting up. Um, are you setting up on field edges on public or no?
Sometimes I have killed on field edges, like cut cornfields. I've
Okay.
set up. I've set up on
Just
beans
like
if
really unpressured or what?
early bow season when it's hot out. There's just not as many people in the woods,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
if someone's been in there, then I'll go somewhere else. But a lot of times, I think this year there's going to be more people than usual, so it could switch. It could toss things up a little bit, make it a little more difficult. But generally speaking, when it's 85, 90 degrees, the beans are still green. It's super early. If the beans are planted late enough, they might still be green. Or say they just cut the corn. Um, it's not too hard to find a field that's not getting hammered by other hunters. And a lot of times you got to have the intel that the deer are hitting it. Like maybe you drove by one evening and you saw like 5 does and a buck out there or something, and they're coming out of one thicket. You know they're coming out of that thicket. And then go in there when the wind is right. I like the wind blowing down the edge of the field or blowing into the field. And then walk the edge slowly, find the best trail you can coming out of that thicket, climb up in a tree. And I've done that a couple times, like fresh cut corn. And I killed a doe 3 or 4 years ago. I killed a doe the first 3 days of the season. One in public, one in private, and then one in public. And the third one was in a fresh cut cornfield. The reason I hunted there because I saw a deer like a day or two earlier. And I said, all right, they're hitting that corn right now. I need to climb that fence row. And sure enough, I killed one.
Nice.
That's the kind
Yeah,
of thing you jump on when it's good.
yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I always feel like field edges on public are really good just the first couple days of season, maybe the first week, the first 2 weekends, if no one's hit it already.
That I would agree. And the last week of season.
Yeah.
Everyone's quit.
Yeah. Everyone's quit. And in Wisconsin, it's usually about 5 degrees. So there ain't a whole lot of people out there.
Actually had that 2 or 3 seasons ago, last weekend of season. Drove by the gas station. It said like 6 degrees. They had like a thermometer on the sign. Like 6 degrees that morning. I go that evening and there's some snow on the ground. The sun goes down. I got my 308. It's a wide open field. It just got hammered through gun season, like from muzzleloader, which is 2 weeks long, through rifle, which is over a month long. It just, it's one of the more popular spots that I stay away from during gun season. But that last weekend, it got bitter cold. People hadn't been hunting it near as much in the past week or two. And sure enough, there's like 5 does that come out in the middle of the field, and I dropped one there last day of season.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Great way to end it.
Yeah. For the field edges, I'd say very beginning, very end of season. Not that you won't kill one in the middle of gun season in a field because, when the rut's going, I don't know if your gun season coincides with the rut or not.
It's usually the tail end. But anyway.
Okay, yeah. Usually our rut's getting good right around muzzleloader season, so there's a ton of people in the woods. So people still do kill bucks because they're running does everywhere. But the best time to get away from pressure is, early season and really late. Before and after the big wave, the Orange Army.
Right. Yeah. The property that I get after close to my house, generally the first opening weekend, maybe there's like 5 vehicles at the various parking lots, maybe 1 vehicle per parking lot or something like that. And then there will be none until maybe there's a father and son and one other guy. And there are 4 of us hunting this. I think the piece is just under 1,000 acres, just 4 of us. And I know the other 3 guys, I actually watched them where they set up and stuff. They don't even go 300 yards from the parking lot. Like they don't go very far. So pretty much everything past that, I got to myself. But those numbers just slowly creep up, and it's like someone rings a dinner bell on Halloween night, because then everybody and their brother starts coming for those first.
Weather. You get that good weather,
right? Yeah.
Cools off. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and then the pressure really picks up until, just like you said, for us, it's the last 2 weeks of December and first week of January or so. And it just really dies off, and it also really helps because then all the deer are kind of pigeonholed into specific food sources and specific bedding areas, and you can get real lucky then too. So,
yeah.
All right, man. Well, we've been on at least an hour. I don't know what the time is anymore, but is there any piece of advice, like one piece of advice you'd give people who are getting out and getting after it in the early season? Like, one of your best pieces that you're free to give out.
I could give out a few. First one that comes to the top of my head is hunt where the deer are, not where you want the deer to be.
Oh, that's a good one. I love that. You
Don't hunt
can't
this spot.
make a
Don't hunt this
spot
spot
good.
because yeah, it looks good. It's pretty. It's got oak trees. They're dropping acorns. Yeah, well, there's no deer sign. Don't hunt there. Or the wind is bad. Don't hunt there. Hunt where the deer are, not where they want to be.
Yep. Yep.
That's one just off the top of my head. The one piece of advice I would give, because we're all guilty of it, myself included. I'll go hunt a spot. I'm pumped. It's a good spot. I've been waiting to hunt it. Then I go in. I'm not seeing the sign I want to see, but I'm gonna hunt it anyway. And don't see anything.
Yep.
So
No, that is a great one. I made a video a while back on that same thing. You can't wish you can't wish a spot into being good,
yeah,
right?
no, you're at the mercy of the deer here, and you gotta be where they are to kill them. And
Yep.
in some states, you could bait them in or whatever if baiting's legal, but even those states don't usually let you do that on public. So you're
Right.
pretty much at the mercy of. And even if you did bait and the deer were catching on to you, you can't make them come to a bait pile, even if it was legal and you're hunting over bait. You still got to be where the deer want to be. So.
Right. No,
Um,
that's a great one. I really like that one. All right. Well, before we sign off, tell people again. I told them kind of beforehand, but tell people again where they can find you.
So my main platform is YouTube. My channel is Catman Outdoors, and then probably second best place to check out my stuff would be Instagram, and then Facebook as well. My username on Instagram is at Catman529, and then on Facebook it's just Catman Outdoors. And I do have a website as well. That's
Okay.
catmanoutdoors.com, and that's about all I got. I don't have TikTok or anything like that.
TikTok's banned now, man. It's gone. Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
it
someone's
is.
gonna buy it or whatever, but yeah.
I figured, yeah.
Oh man, I never got into the TikTok game. My neighbor's kid always wants me to do TikTok dances with her. I
Oh
just
God,
make a fool of myself.
yeah.
Um, how do I gotta like I've never asked you this, but how did you ever get the name Catman?
Good question. When I was probably like 12,
Okay.
I uh I got into fishing before I got into hunting. I was like I think 11 when I started fishing, and I figured out how to catch channel cats down in the creek using crawfish for bait. And I got on some forum online and had to make a username, and I was into catfish, so I just did Catman529, which is my birth date, and that just kind of stuck, you know, through the years. That was like my username, my screen name
Yeah.
on the internet. And so when I made a channel, you know, it was just like Catman529 at first, and then I was like, no, I'll give it a name. I'll just call it Catman Outdoors. So it just kind
There
of
you
stuck.
go. And it sticks. The
Yep.
catfishing man. All
Yep.
right, awesome. Well, thanks, John. Really appreciate you coming on tonight and everything. And I look forward to the oak tree videos and then also the also seeing you kill one opening day. I hope you
I
do.
hope so. Don't jinx it. I hope so.
I'll knock on wood right now. All right,
Yeah.
thanks, man. Catch you later.
All right.